Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's show. My name is Spencer Walsh. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We got a good one for you because we're talking about a very dramatic subject, the Biden White House. How are they doing? And it's not good, folks. People are starting to realize that they're completely and utterly politically powerless, and it's not looking too good for them. We'll run it through also with a new Quinnipiac poll. We'll start with this, showing Biden at 33% approval rating. It is an outlier, but could it be a sign of a further drop like we saw in September and the start of the school year? We will discuss. Also, what Biden is up to in the Senate with Chuck Schumer, as he was revealed his endgame for the clash over the filibuster and voting rights reform. Joe Biden apparently with Joe Manchin pulling out all of the carrots but none of the sticks, including bringing in on the phone Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, and Oprah Winfrey to try and convince Joe Manchin, the Coal Baron, who's definitely going to really want to care about what Oprah Winfrey has to say in terms of getting him on this voting rights bill. Also, Bernie Sanders making a play. We see a very restive both left and right wing for the Biden administration, which is definitely not something that they are going to want to see. Is Bernie Sanders sounding the alarm with working class people fed up with the Democrats' failed strategy. So they're definitely getting it from both sides here. And we'll take a look at something we have not done in a bit, which is the other side. Trump slamming politicians who say they won't reveal their booster status. Also, really Ron DeSantis there, also taking you through the Bronx fire and a possible Biden-Cheney 2024 suggestion from one of the most influential New York Times columnists. All right, we're starting at the top, though, with this poll here. Quinnipiac showing Biden at 33% approval rating, a very, very rough number for the Biden administration, whichever way you want to spin it right now. And right now, some of the discontent here seeming to come from a left and a Democratic base that has really disapproved of what the president has done, and just seeing, I think, really kind of appropriately so, like, what is the point of voting for this guy if you are not going to get anything done? There has been one bill of any significant consequence. It really did look like they, with the infrastructure bill, that completely went by the wayside. That was a joke, a complete corporate giveaway. And no direct aid to the American people. But let's go through this here in the Hill, some of the data on this. So just 1/3 of Americans apparently now are approving. So this is to put in the context. This is like the low end of what Trump would get. He'd get anywhere from like low 30s at his worst to maybe high 40s at his absolute best. With like Rasmussen or whatever. But that was pretty much about it for him. Biden's had a bit more mobility, but so far the mobility has pretty much all been downwards. The poll showed Biden's approval rating had dipped slightly from in November, where his approval rating was at 36%. Quinnipiac, the outlier on this, but generally, they do have a good sense of what is to come, and they've been a pretty well respected polling company. And a big thing, probably what's happening is if you could push some of these kind of undecided supporters, they're going to go against Biden. Or these kind of soft Biden support. May be more out there, that may be what other polls are picking up versus Quinnipiac maybe not so much picking up. But it also, it follows a broader trend of underwater polling numbers for Biden as he grapples with a series of difficult tasks to tackle, such as rising prices, a persisting coronavirus pandemic, and disagreements with his own party that saw progress on the Build Back Better agenda. Wednesday's tough poll numbers are largely attributed to poor marks from independent voters, 57% of whom said they disapproved of Biden's job performance compared to 25% who approved. And again, a lot of this stuff is making sure we have a humming, functioning government again, kind of proving to people that could happen, and was not just a product of the Trump presidency, was a fundamental part of the Biden campaign. And here I think you can see it has been fundamentally taken a back seat. So Biden also saw his approval rating from among Democrats dip from 87% to 75% in the latest poll. That's definitely going to be something people, for example, on the left wing of the party are going to be watching over the next few months, especially. I think the big juggernaut is how bad this midterms campaign is going to be. Where will the economy be? It's not looking good. December's report, especially with the rising prices up 7%, not looking good at all for Biden. But if this kind of current track, generic ballot looking a little bit better, but that is not always the best indication there for the Democrats. But if things, polling wise, approval of the party, things continue to be that bad, And it really, if they lose, houses in the multiple houses, possibly in the midterm, very likely multiple houses in the midterms, Biden, could be, no lie here, it's not, you really, I think people out there should, especially, 2022 rolls around, they do well in the Senate, they take back these seats, get the majority back 50-50, or get the majority back in the Senate, Republicans do, and they take back the House, which is probably even more likely, the chances that Biden is impeached, and not just impeached, fully removed in the Senate, removed may be like a little bit below 50%, but impeached definitely higher than 50%. You have to imagine the Republican caucus, especially as Trump continues to take a more active role in this, is going to be baying for blood here. But it's going to be interesting to watch, what may happen. I think the midterms are going to be the biggest kind of determining point from 2024. But for the midterms, things are not looking good for Biden. Among registered voters, 35% approved of Biden's job performance, while 54% disapproved, according to the poll. Also, hurting Biden's approval rating was in the poll was a majority of respondents disapproving of his handling of key issues. With the poll here finding 57% disapproved of Biden's handling on the economy, and 54% disapproved of his handling on foreign policy, and 55% disapproved of his handling on the pandemic, which is once a consistent bright spot for Biden. 55% being underwater here on the pandemic, absolutely devastating. For pretty much, the biggest thing that, when people voted for Biden, they wanted a change and they wanted out of this pandemic. And that has been really bad. The survey found respondents were split on which party they'd rather see win the majority in the House, because I really think this is what this is coming down to, is like a deep resonance and final realization in America that the government is fundamentally incapable of doing anything. So, when voters, especially kind of independent voters who just kind of want politics to work for them in some way and are not super tied to one kind of party or partisan identity, and a lot of times these voters are not going to be, they're just going to be kind of on the edge of the middle class, kind of the barely middle class, that Nina Turner always talks about. They voted for Biden. They, get something done, actual substantive agenda here, and they're realizing that they can't do anything either. There can't be any change. So that's why you're not really seeing the Republican Party rise too much off of this. 43% preferring the GOP and 42% saying the Democrats in the Senate. 45% said they like to see the GOP in control. And 41% saying Democrats. So the poll from Quinnipiac surveyed 1,313 adults right after the kind of a January 6th Remembrance Day. So, should have been a relatively good time for Biden. So it's interesting to see how polls, what polls come out like that, how are they like as well. Let's go to the Senate here, where here in Politico, Chuck Schumer will bring elections and voting legislation to the Senate floor in the coming days using existing congressional rules to evade an initial GOP filibuster. So, these rules coming here, Mitch McConnell tonight on the floor slamming them as blatantly unconstitutional, something that, really should not be a surprise to anybody. This is going to come down to Schumer and, not Schumer, but Manchin and Sinema agreeing to get rid of the filibuster here with the 50 vote majority, or change it for voting rights bills. He kind of, just like Build Back Better, just like I always said that he would do, and you can go back and listen to this, but nobody is. He would roll back those promises nice and slow. I'm not comfortable with this. I said it was, but I want to water it down in this way, and then I'll get there. Just completely not going in good faith. Solely there to keep the status quo and really just Republicans happy, because the bill will be sent to the Senate with a message from the House. It will not be subject to initial filibuster by the GOP and will be debated on the floor. Instead, the Senate will confront its raging debate over the filibuster when Majority Leader Schumer moves to shut down debate. The Senate will finally debate voting rights legislation, and then every senator will be faced with a choice of whether to pass the legislation to protect our democracy, Schumer wrote in a memo obtained by Democrats. So, all right, let's get into, this is a little bit of an audio here from the Senate floor. Let's see what this is. Chuck Schumer.
The bipartisan 60-vote requirement is eliminated. Our colleagues on the other side of the aisle will have unchecked power to write the laws.
This is John Conway in the Senate.
330 million Americans.
Pretty big Republican senator.
We know they're already willing to manufacture a voting rights crisis to increase their own power. If they're willing to do that, what aren't they willing to do? I know I'm.
So yeah, you can kind of see here, even Conrad, like, oh no. And he's standing behind a sign that says 94% of voters said voting in 2020 was easy. And, if that happens, then what else are they allowed to do? And again, the projection of manufacturing a crisis was great, but this is kind of how you have the Wall Street Journal type Republican playing into what they need to do now to get elected, especially in a state like Texas that, Cornyn, whatever is from, is that you absolutely have to play into that, that election was stolen, voting rights fears in some way. Clearly, this is how he is doing it. So Schumer's missive comes amid torn activity among Senate Democrats to pass legislation cracking down on gerrymandering, making campaign finance reforms, and creating national standards for early voting. President Joe Biden will attend a special caucus meeting with Senate Democrats Thursday as the party struggles I wonder how that's going to go. As the party struggles on how and whether to weaken the filibuster reform to pass elections reform, and senators are furiously lobbying Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema. Pretty much, they seem to actually be here, especially on the voting rights reform, which, probably not the best political move here for Democrats. It's something they need to do, but, I think the best political move would to actually, give them something to vote for before you make it, so easy to vote, because that may come back to bite you in the first place. That's normally how the political party works, but it is good to see they're, passing some kind of bare voting rights reforms. So passing legislation cracking down here on gerrymandering, making campaign finance reforms, and creating national standards for early voting, which I think would be very nice because, that caused a lot of confusion in 2020. So even as Schumer vows to hold a potential rules change by vote by Martin Luther King Day on Monday, he has yet to indicate what his final proposal to the caucus would be. That moment is now only a few days off, and Schumer's tactics to ensure that voting in the elections debate, and this is probably the biggest moment probably of Schumer's career with this kind of Senate. He actually has power now and actually playing with it a little bit in the Senate. Very, very interesting. We'll see how he does. So yeah, Schumer's tactics, can ensure that the voting elections debate can at least come to the Senate floor unimpeded by a GOP filibuster, but it will take just a simple majority to bring the bills to the floor and 60 votes to end debate unless the Democrats change the Senate rules. That's what they need to do to just have a shot in this bill. And, it is interesting. You can kind of see a lot of factions in the Democratic Party. For example, a huge portion of black representatives are coming out very strongly against Manchin here, where they were not as much on the actual policy matter, which again, just in general for the Democratic Party in terms of priorities, not the best move to see. You're fighting. It's just basically really what it is leveling the playing field, in an electoral sense. But, people are going to see it as, you're fighting to keep yourself in power really, really hard. But, why weren't you doing these things to pass, things that we elected you to pass? That could be a bit of a problem here. So pretty much what they're trying to do is, take the Freedom to Vote Act and John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and put it together. And no clear look, as to what is in. One of them, so pretty much these two measures separate votes. So one of them contains, an array of proposals to establish nationwide standards for ballot access, aiming to nullify the wave of new restrictions in Republican-led states. It would require that states allow at minimum 15 consecutive days of early voting, and that all voters can request to vote by mail, establish a new automatic voter registration programs, and make Election Day a national holiday. Very, very important there. The other one is named for John Lewis, the civil rights icon and former congressman. We talked about this with Jacob. That would restore parts of the Voting Rights Act weakened by Supreme Court rulings. Among them was one mandating the jurisdictions with a history of discrimination when prior approval or pre-clearance from the Justice Department or federal courts in Washington before changing voting rules. So that's a little bit of what could be in this bill that they're working on here. But of course, how do they get that bill passed? That is the filibuster. So Senate Democrats are weighing out several potential changes, including reinstating a talking filibuster, which they could only really do so many times. Republicans creating a carve-out that would allow elections and voting legislation to pass by a simple majority, allowing Senate to begin debate on a bill by a simple majority vote. The question is, would Manchin even support these bills have if they did get rid of the filibuster. That is something I think they should really check on here. No final decisions have been made. Days before Democrats are slated to vote on the proposal. Probably see something out of this by Thursday when Biden comes and meets with the Senate. Ben Cardin, middle of the road corporate senator there, saying, I don't really know what's going on. And it's clear Democrats don't have the numbers to make rules changes along party lines, at least not now. Asked when Democrats need to come to a consensus, John Tester, Montana, said, "As I told you for the last 2 months, yesterday would be great." He's like, I'm in Montana here. My people are asking me to please do something. The truth is, at some point, Schumer's got to bring this to a head, and that's why he's having this vote. Yeah, and finally, it took them long enough. This whole year, they have been doing this whole crap of just, let's give Manchin this, let's wait for this, and the Republicans that. If John Tester of Montana is saying this about somebody who's in a state that's probably just about as red as his is, you things are getting really, really bad. And the fact that Schumer hasn't done this, as Tester said yesterday, is a real, I think, black mark on his record. Democrats are oscillating between voting on a talking filibuster or carve-out for elections reform, according to Senate familiar with the discussions, and they may end up voting on both. Going to be interesting to see where the party, how the lines go, the voting lines come in on that. Some Democrats want to preserve significant sway for the minority and prefer a talking filibuster that would allow the minority to gum up the Senate for weeks, but senators would have the floor to do so. Have to hold the floor to do so and talk for a long time. That may actually, kill some of them off, given their advanced age. But others prefer the carve-out, which allow a quicker majority vote, but pare back minority rights too much for some. Every 24 hours, the conversation feels like it has shifted as we go back and forth. Martin Heinrich of New Mexico, Democrat, said that negotiations are in flux. He's a senator, by the way, in case you didn't know. Senate Democrats are seeking to pass these two election and voting reform bills. The first would, again, establish federally mandated bills. We talked about that already. While they both support the election reform bills, apparently, Manchin and Sinema have insisted for more than a year that they will not toss the Senate's current 60-vote threshold, and Manchin has historically opposed changing Senate rules along party lines, an option known as going nuclear. And they're not alone, as other Senate Democrats are also not committing to changing the rules. But it does seem like some have flipped and are now lobbying him, including possibly Mark Kelly. But also Kelly, he said, though, Wednesday he has not committed to anything. So a small group of Democratic caucus members, Tester, Kane, and King, have met with Manchin to discuss rule change options. Again, these are moderates here. And Sinema met with a small group of Democratic senators on Tuesday evening. In a world where you're trying to secure the support of a small handful of members, you got to be flexible. That is the Democratic... that is the Democratic state of being, flexible, to say the least. All right. We talked about some of the resistance there on the right to the filibuster reform. Left getting pretty restive, too. Bernie Sanders with some strong words. That is coming in a minute. Ladies and gentlemen, listeners of the Spencer Walsh Radio Network, happy holidays, and thank you so much for supporting us this year. We are willing to give the gift of audio to you this holiday season, and boy, will it keep coming. We have an action-packed schedule through the 17th of December to the 16th of January, and that all starts with new episodes of Newsflash Now 3 times a week on our old summer schedule of Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. In addition, Hidden History returns with 6 select episodes, 4 on Tuesdays and 2 on select Thursdays, to give you the perfect historical narrative to keep you interested through those times with the family this holiday season. It's been such a great year, and it couldn't have been as good for the Spencer Walsh Radio Network without your support. So, to another year of great audio.
Yo, Pierre, you want to come out?
You are listening to Newsflash. We're getting that music on because Democrats, as we talked about, are in that fighting mood. Bernie Sanders wants Democrats to come out fighting, saying they are failing the working class, and the Republicans getting a bit of fight. We discussed that we're discussing that next. But it's been almost 12 months since Joe Biden. This is here in Jacobin by Neil Meyer. It's been almost 12 months since Joe Biden was inaugurated as the 46th president of the United States, and the Democrats have very little to show for it. They promised to beat the pandemic and replace the age of inequality with an economy that works for all, but all we got was a new COVID culture war, a temporary and poorly implemented child tax credit, emphasis on those two right there, and an infrastructure package that was more of a slush fund for private corporations and a substantive investment in the future. And, I really feel like Bernie Sanders, watching him over the past, half year has been pretty aggravating, at least to say the least, because it feels like he's a broken record, and he's saying all the right things, but that's always cool and good, but at a certain point saying the right things just seems almost sad and pathetic if you're not going to act on any of the things that you say or don't have the ability to. Because if Bernie Sanders came so close to getting the nomination 2 times, has such a big and powerful movement supposedly, he should be able to exercise more power than this. It's a fundamental feeling of the left that they have not been able to do that as such quite yet. So anyway, Bernie, so he knows the score. In an interview with The Guardian published this week, he told Labor reporter Stephen Greenhouse that Democrats need a major course correction. He attacked the current strategy for passing Build Back Better, the infrastructure and social services plan. We've tried a strategy over the last several months, which has mostly been backdoor negotiations. It hasn't, with a handful of senators, it hasn't succeeded on Build Back Better or on voting rights. It's demoralized billions of Americans. And that is exactly right. And that is the big difference in the strategy of negotiation that we had with the Biden presidency and the Bernie presidency, which is so key, because Biden, ridiculously, as we now all can see, was able to sell himself as the big person who understands how to get things done in the Senate. And Bernie was like, I'm going to use the movement. I don't have the same Senate ties, but, with the movement, with outside pressure and forces, that is how we're going to be able to get this stuff done. And, Bernie is able, he tried to implement that strategy as head of the budget committee, but that, it can only do so much. As he says here, it is no great secret the Republican Party is winning more and more support from working people. It's not because the Republican Party has anything to say to them. It's because it's a two-party system. Key point here that so many people don't understand, because it is a zero-sum game in so many ways. If you go up, the other party goes down. It's not like, you got like the liberal Democrats like in the UK or something. It's because too many ways the Democratic Party has turned its back in the working class. So Sanders ratcheting up pressure on the Democrats, saying, I think the Democratic Party has to address the long-simmering debate, which is, which side are you on? Are we prepared to stand with working families and take on powerful corporate interests? And, it's clear that they're not, but is he actually going to say it? The solution, Sanders argues, is to start bringing up popular pieces of Build Back Better up for a vote one by one. Make Senator Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema vote against creating a permanent child tax credit and reducing the cost of prescription drugs. Make the fight public, loud, and intense, which is, it's another great way of putting it. If Biden were, a real, actual, if he actually cared about getting the stuff done, he might, for example, say, threaten to investigate the criminality that is very, very clear in terms of, EpiPen price fixing with Joe Manchin's daughter. There's some fishy stuff going on with Joe Manchin's wife as well. There's plenty of opportunities there. And, Kristen Sinema with her lobbying donations, that could be a very interesting point of interest, for investigators in Merrick Garland. If you don't want to go after January 6th, but that would be, so far off. It's almost not even worth discussing. This, I think, is a much kind of better deal because it's, running ads. Each vote is a new news story about how they're not voting for this, kind of Biden agenda. It can all fail. But the question is, will they actually face the consequences of it? And even still, that action, by Schumer, by Biden, very unlikely. So for one thing, taking the fight against right-wing Democrats to the public goes against how Democratic politicians have always done things. Democrats on Capitol Hill think they belong together as a family. They aggressively police anyone who dare to try and level criticisms at fellow members of the party. When progressives dare to criticize Manchin, during the Build Back Better debate, others in the party came pretty hard on them, saying, it could derail future negotiations. Joe Manchin has to be placated at all times. Look at how that turned out. Biden, spat on, laughed at multiple times. We've covered it all throughout on this show. So nor are all Democrats at all likely to go down to Arizona or West Virginia and try to mobilize hundreds of thousands of people to pressure Sinema and Manchin. Imagining Democrats trying to do this is crazy. And of course there's a real roadblock. This is really why so much of this stuff is going on. The Democrats have two bases. The first base is among voters, the base they readily take for granted except during elections when they deploy the well-worn demand that voters are falling in line to save democracy. This election is the most important. This one is when it really counts. This one's when the democracy, Michelle Obama doing the same stuff just recently. But yeah, the second base is the ruling class. This is the base they would never dare consider to take for granted. It's what pays the bills, gives Democrats jobs when they lose elections, hosts lavish parties in their honor, and staffs their most important offices. The base whose stocks the Democratic politicians own and trade with impunity in order to enrich themselves. In early 2021, it seemed like the corporate base might have loosened the leash on the Joe Biden administration. Scared by the rise of right-wing populism, many in the corporate world appeared to openly embrace redistributive policies. But that window closed quickly. If one wants to redistribute, it has to come from somewhere, and business was in no mood to give from its own plate. They were seeing record profits, based off of, seeing, more demand, paying workers the same or less, and raising those prices because they could, creating an incredibly beneficial corporate situation where they could just, as we talked about, kind of all pawn it off on inflation. As the New York Times headline put it in the past summer, in social policy bill, businesses see a lot to like. They oppose it. The accompanying blurb read, resistance to tax increases outweighs appeal of $3.5 trillion measure containing child care credits and other items that corporations embrace. The result has been a weak Biden administration and a lost year. There's no reason to put hope in the Democratic Party making a dramatic course correction. Yes, they'll probably lose the midterms, and no, there's no reason to think that will stop them going down with the ship without a fight. We've all been here before. If there's one thing Democratic Party politicians excel at, it's losing. After all, consequences for them are pretty minor. They lose an election, they get a high-paid job at some corporate outfit. That means we need a different plan. Bernie and the squad, who have done a laudable job in Congress of standing up to Democratic duplicity, they did not fall for, Biden coming in. Ro Khanna, by the way, I'm sorry, should be incredibly embarrassed. Marilyn John Paul, incredibly embarrassed about how they held up the squad, voting against the infrastructure bill, doing well there. They had the power and the opportunity to stake out an independent course. They're possibly the only ones besides the labor movement who they need to work at, who at this moment who at this moment have the name, recognition, and ability to mobilize resources and supporters to do what needs to be done nationally. As Ben Beckett argued in Jacobin, it's time for left-wingers in Congress to call its millions of supporters and activists to action. Bernie could provide his promise to be an organizer-in-chief, but he may not be president, but he can still play that role. With their resources and support, Bernie and the squad could really begin a relentless campaign of speeches, ads, petitions, rallies, and marches, calling on Democrats to put the agenda they claim to support to a vote and apply pressure against right-wing Democrats. Vote on those agenda items initially. They could rally unions and DSA people and all that stuff. Why not organize a march on Washington? Occupations of Democrats. See if AOC will show up this time. Or launch a vigorous bird-dogging of campaign against Manchin and Sinema on a scale we haven't seen yet. The point is they have power, they have movement capability, and they should and need to use it. All right, let's go now to the Star Tribune. This is a Minneapolis paper here. Former President Donald Trump is slamming politicians who refuse to say whether they have received the COVID-19 booster shots as gutless, folks. Gutless. Trump, who was booed last month by supporters after revealing he had gotten a booster shot, has become increasingly vocal in calling out those who question the vaccine's efficacy and safety. Candace Owens now talking about drinking colloidal silver, even though she's been vaxxed and boosted and all that stuff, just because she's playing that part of the game. It really is got a lot of this stuff has to do with, playing kind of footsie around Trump, but, they have been completely gutless, and kind of kowtowing to them, and kind of playing this game. And that is, why I think Trump's so powerful, because they're all doing this for him. And if he calls them out, because they have to, play the game of, appealing to the base. And if he calls them out, it is going to be pretty tough. You got to say it. Whether you've had it or not, say it, Trump said in an interview that aired Tuesday night on the conservative One American News Network. Trump, who was boosted last month by supporters, booed last month, So it's definitely a change in posture for Trump as he eyes another run for the White House and faces a potential long list of competition from possible Republican challenges. And this is exactly how he won the last time, especially with the Republican nomination, is exposing all these people as just complete pretenders that everybody knows they are. Because it's not about policy, especially in the Republican Party. It's about who has the most swag, who has the ability, who's the most, alpha, in pissing the most people off, making the most people kind of come out and publicly kowtow before them, and that time and time again has been Donald Trump, and that's why all the people are saying all these people are coming out in terms of he did great on COVID, and also kind of tying themselves into knots, like for example Candace Owens on this vaccine issue, and DeSantis, another situation, he's been very coy about doing the booster, because he's trying to play the base. And Trump's like, why are we still doing this? I'm going to bring the base over here and, I'm going to take up the tent, move it to where I want, and you guys are going to be all out in the cold. And, he's correctly identifying his top challenger, Ron DeSantis, and taking a few shots. Taking a few literal pun not intended actually. Trump while in office constantly downplayed the risk posed by COVID and received the vaccine privately, even as other members of the administration were inoculated in public to help boost the confidence in the shot. Well, I've taken it. I've had the booster, Trump said in an interview. I watched a couple of politicians be interviewed, and one of the questions was, did you get the booster? And they're answering it. Like, in other words, the answer is yes, but they don't want to answer it because they're gutless. Trump did not name names, but his spokespeople did not immediately respond to questions about the politicians he's referencing. But Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, a rising star in the Republican Party, has notably declined to say whether he's received a booster. Talking to Maria Barrera-Romo, DeSantis said, so I've done whatever I did, the normal shot. And that at the end of the day, it's people's individual decisions about what they want to do. Many House Republicans, including Trump allies, have also declined to disclose their vaccination status, such as Marjorie Taylor Greene, are open about their refusal to get it, and at least say it at some point. Many House Republicans, including top Trump allies, have also declined to say that. And by criticizing other politicians reluctant to disclose their vaccination status, Trump appears to be looking to turn the shots into a political issue that allows him to promote his administration's success. Really kind of act like he, was the main driving force behind Operation Warp Speed, which is, kind of ridiculous in the first place. But, if he says it, I feel like he could really make that narrative stick, to be honest. But yeah, it allows him to promote his administration's success in facilitating their development while creating a contrast with the other possible 2024 GOP candidates loath to upset the base because, they feel like they're upsetting the base, they're upsetting Trump, and Trump is the only person who can move the base in the Republican Party at this point. So this was going to ravage the country far beyond what it is right now. Take credit for it. Don't let them take it away. Don't take it away from ourselves, he said in December during an appearance with Fox News host Bill O'Reilly when he started going down this road. In an interview with conservative commentator Candace Owens, Trump stressed how well the vaccines work at preventing hospitalization and serious illness. It's going to be so interesting to see, the polling on this, because if they can really Trump can really turn this vax tide, especially in the Republican Party, and get people convinced on it, it is going to be very remarkable. I also want to talk to David Langan, who's kind of the Republican correspondent, definitely a key marker for me on like right wing issues. And see what he thinks about this because, it's very, very interesting. I'm not entirely quite sure. All right, we got one more story. It's a Biden-Cheney Thomas Friedman op-ed. It's crazy. We'll get to it in 20 seconds.
Buckingham Palace has announced the death of His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh.
It's News Flash.
You're listening to Newsflash. We're getting to this Thomas Friedman article here, proposing, it's been kind of roundly shared on Twitter, going cold here, Biden, Liz Cheney 2024. What would that, legit, because, again, these people, largely viewing, my predictions here, and it's going to be completely, viewing policy on a completely kind of politics as a completely aesthetic level. Like, this is like the right thing because it's what's best for democracy. It shows, we can bring, bipartisan people, Republican and Democrat, red and blue, country coming, very basic, West Wing level, kind of very, very like, aesthetic only thinking. So Thomas, and very old kind of conventional wisdom mindset here. That's my prediction, but let's see. As I've noted before, one reason I pay very close attention to the Israeli-Palestinian arena is that a lot of trends get perfected there first and then go global. Airline hijacking, suicide bombing, building a wall, and the challenges of pluralism, and lots more. It's off-Broadway to Broadway, so what's playing there these days might be a harbinger for politics in the United States. Answer: it's the most diverse national unity government in Israel's history, one that stretches from Jewish settlers on the right all the way to an Israeli Arab Islamist party and super liberals on the left. And, I'm going to try and not interject my opinion about this Palestinian analysis here. Most important, it's holding together, getting stuff done, and muting the hyperpolarization that was making Israel ungovernable. Again, it's not, I think it actually, he's kind of right about it, but, the interpretation that I'm taking here is it's not really getting stuff done. A lot of the stuff I've seen is really the same policies continuing pretty much unabated with more characters, more, the only thing that, has changed is now that, especially liberal Zionists have that talking point to say, oh no, we got Israeli Arabs taking a big seat in the governing party in the Knesset. Like, this has never happened before. And then, people are still getting detained. Settlers still moving in, violent attacks still supported by the Israeli government. The policies, the march forward, the settler colonialism continues unabated. So is this what America needs in 2024? A ticket of Joe Biden and Liz Cheney, Joe Biden or Lisa Murkowski or Kamala Harris and Mitt Romney or Stacey Abrams and Liz Cheney or Amy Klobuchar and Liz Cheney, or any of such combination? I feel like I'm going crazy. Before you leap to the comment section, hear me out. In June, an utterly wild period in which Israel held 4 national elections over 2 years, and they kept failing to produce a stable governing majority, the lambs there actually lay down with the lions. Key Israeli politicians swallowed their pride, softened policy edges, and came together for a 4-year national unity government led by right-wing Prime Minister Naftali Bennett and left-of-center defense minister who bombed the crap out of Gaza and said it was you do it again. If I'm thinking of the same person here, Yair Lapid, they're to switch places after 2 years. And for the first time, Israeli Arab Party, the Islamist organization RAM, played a vital role in cementing Israeli coalition. Again, this is all great. They came together. I'm not too familiar with RAM, and how actually, Palestinians, Gazans, West Bank people on the ground actually view it. But from what I've seen, the policy changes have not been substantive. Been very kind of around the edges, rhetorical. You heard Jacob Friedman say it on the show. Oh, there was a meeting at Mahmoud Abbas's house. That is the best that this historic unity government has been able to come up with. And I think, come to think of it, that makes a great metaphor for Kamala Harris, and exactly why this Biden-Cheney idea is just ridiculous. What forced everyone's hand? A broad agreement that Israeli politics were being held hostage by then Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu, who would resist putting together any government that he would not lead, apparently because if he didn't lead, he could lose his chance at some kind of immunity from prosecution on multiple corruption charges that could lead to prison. Sound familiar? Trump, comes into the very just dumb liberal fantasy that Trump is, 2 seconds away from going to prison at, any time in the last 5 years, that, he's incredibly corrupt. But somehow, I think there's something to be said for the fact that they've been saying it for 5 to 6 years at this point, getting to 2022 now, and it just has not been in any way effective. It's been said so many times. It's almost like he definitely should be in prison for something, some point along the way. But, at this point, I feel like I just believe it when I see it. So Netanyahu is smarter than Donald Trump, constantly delegitimizing the mainstream media and the Israeli justice system and vigorously exploiting social and religious and ethnic fault lines to divide and rule. He eventually stressed out the system so much, several of his former allies broke away to forge a unity coalition with the Israeli center, left, and Arab parties. As a Hebrew University of Jerusalem religious philosopher Moshe Halbertal put it to me, what happened here is that there is still enough civic responsibility, not everywhere, but enough that the political class felt the continued breakdown of the rule of law and more elections was leading nowhere, which was an indulgence that Israel simply could not afford given its highly diverse population and dangerous neighborhood. So again, to kind of put that into, sensible, the context of reality here is, the sense of, civic responsibility that led these people to do what they did was, really to kind of just come in and stop Trump here in America, right? Like, this government was formed on stopping Trump, and, this new Israeli government will neither annex West Bank nor make final peace with the Palestinians, Halbertal noted. But they will support violent settler attacks, and, they won't be as persistent with the settlers, but they're not really going to do anything to stop it. That will attempt to renew the relationship with Palestinian Authority rather than weakening it. It is one that prevented a racist anti-Arab party that allowed to Netanyahu from entering the cabinet, and is one that's counterbalancing Bibi's strong embrace of the less than democratic ultra-nationalist states in Europe and evangelical Christians and Trump Republicans in America by rebuilding ties with Democrats, liberal American Jews, and liberal parties in Europe. Not really looking to... But, thinking about, in the end, what happens if, for example, Liz Cheney joins the Democratic Party, but what happens substantively? How many people does she control? And the answer is not many, because so many people, the January 6th stuff in America is not the big deal that people, for example, like Jacob Friedman, Thomas Friedman, think that it is. I'm sorry, it's just not going to play with people because they are worried about the economy, less and less so the pandemic, but inflation, how they're going to be able to put food on their table, how good their jobs are, how, if they can find a better one, the Great Resignation. Like, that is the stuff that's animating people's minds here. Most people understand that, most of this kind of political situation, it's a show. Governments will, just like the one that's going on in Israel, governments will continue to be the same. And, the big reason why that coalition had to happen is because Netanyahu was just going to mask off. The project is still going to stay the same. Just like in America, because in ways here, this comparison by Thomas Friedman of Israel to America is very accurate. And in both times, this kind of fusion coalition had to come in and step things, keep the project going, keep the eventual endpoint the same, which is more and more Israeli control of the of the United States, and of the West Bank, and the United States are just keeping the status quo uninterrupted, and gradually shifting things more rightward while still having free and fair elections that are at least believable to the people. Now that was threatened. Those two things were threatened. These coalitions had to come in and form in place. And, it's not going to be a political, policy-based coalition, but it's not like the Democratic Party, as currently stands, was a policy-based coalition in the first place, so it's not really going to matter if Liz Cheney comes in. It would completely represent a sacrificing of their values, but with the Democratic Party, you have to ask, what values do they still have? All right, that's all we got for you guys today. We'll be back on Friday with a Hidden History final episode of Season 6 this Thursday.